It was supposed to be just another Tuesday, but for 22-year-old Emma Caldwell, it became the day her entire life unraveled, and then took a turn no one could have predicted. Emma had just lost her job cleaning classrooms at Willow Ridge High. Without warning, the principal handed her a thin envelope and said they no longer needed her services. No reason, no kindness, just the end of the only income she and her ailing mother had. With a soaked backpack and boots filled with cold slush from the melting snow, Emma trudged home down Maple Street, her head bowed against the wind. Tears slipped down her cheeks, mixing with the freezing rain. But fate had other plans. Just as she reached the busy intersection of Sycamore and 8th, a car sped off with a squeal, and behind it, an elderly man lay motionless beside a toppled walker. Dozens of people stood frozen, phones out, capturing the moment like it was a show. No one moved. Except Emma. Without hesitation, she dropped her bag and sprinted into traffic, kneeling beside the man. His pulse was weak, his lips turning blue. She wrapped her arms around him and pulled him toward the curb, shielding him with her own body from the oncoming cars. Her jeans were soaked, her hands shaking, but her voice stayed strong as she called 911 herself. No one else would. That simple act, just doing the right thing, would set in motion a chain of events that neither she nor the world could have foreseen. By morning, a video of her bravery had gone viral. Messages flooded in. Strangers called her a hero. But one message stood out among them all. An email from the assistant of Arthur Langston, the man whose life she had saved. And that was only the beginning. The morning after Emma Caldwell saved a man's life, she woke up to the familiar sound of her mother coughing in the kitchen. Their tiny second-floor apartment above the laundromat still smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt toast. Emma, still sore from kneeling on the cold asphalt the day before, rubbed the sleep from her eyes and reached for her cracked phone on the nightstand. That's when she noticed the flood of notifications. Hundreds of messages, many from unknown numbers. One read, "Is this the young woman who saved that man on Sycamore Street? You're a hero." Another chimed in seconds later, "I saw what you did. You're incredible." Confused, Emma opened her browser. Her breath caught in her throat. There she was, front and center in a viral video titled, "Young woman risks her life to save a stranger, crowd watches and does nothing." The thumbnail captured her soaked jeans, her trembling hands, and her unwavering focus as she shielded the elderly man with her body. The video already had over 2 million views. Her heart pounded as she read the thousands of comments calling her brave, selfless, and extraordinary. Offers for help, job inquiries, even news interviews poured into her inbox. But none of that compared to the email with the subject line, "Urgent regarding Mr. Arthur Langston." Emma hesitated, then opened it. Arthur Langston, it turned out, was not just any man. He was the founder and CEO of Langston Health Systems, a multi-billion-dollar healthcare empire, and one of the most respected philanthropists in the country. According to the email from his legal office, he was recovering well, but he hadn't stopped thinking about the woman who saved him. He'd instructed his team to find her, at any cost. Moments later, Emma's phone rang. A calm voice introduced herself as Laura Vance, Mr. Langston's executive assistant. "He'd like to speak with you personally," she said. "Would you be available to meet him today?" Still in disbelief, Emma said yes. Just over an hour later, a sleek black town car pulled up in front of her building. Her mother watched from the window wide-eyed as Emma stepped into the car, still wearing her only decent sweater, her knees bruised beneath her worn jeans. The driver didn't say much as they wound through the city streets, finally pulling up to a shimmering tower of glass and steel with Langston Enterprises emblazoned in gold across the entrance. Inside, everyone seemed to know who she was. Whispers followed her down polished marble corridors. She was escorted into a private office filled with sunlight, where Arthur Langston sat beside a window, draped in a soft blanket, his eyes alight the moment she entered. "You saved my life," he said quietly, his voice full of warmth. "And I never forget people like you." Emma was speechless. "I've met world leaders and generals," he continued, "but I've never seen courage like I saw in that video. No one helped, but you did. You risked your life for someone you didn't even know. That kind of character can't be taught." Then he nodded to Laura. She stepped forward with a tablet and handed it to Emma. Four luxury cars filled the screen: a crimson Ferrari, a charcoal Rolls-Royce, a snow-white Tesla, and a midnight blue Bentley, each with a golden tag that read, "To Emma Caldwell. Thank you." Emma stared in disbelief. "Why?" she whispered. "Because kindness like yours is rare," Arthur said, his voice tender but firm. "You didn't do it for fame or reward. You did it because it was right. That kind of heart is priceless. And I want the world to know it still exists." Emma tried to hold back tears, but they came anyway. And just like that, everything changed. Not because she asked for it, but because one small act of courage reminded the world what true character looks like. And this was still only the beginning. Emma Caldwell hadn't even brushed her hair when the emails started pouring in. Just a day earlier, she'd been fired from her janitorial job at Jefferson High. Let go without warning, no thank you, no severance. Her boots were still wet from the icy puddles she trudged through on the way home when she saw the elderly man collapse in the middle of Sycamore Street. And without a moment's hesitation, she'd sprinted into traffic and shielded his fragile body with her own. Now, sitting in the cramped kitchen of her second-story apartment, Emma stared in disbelief at her cracked phone screen. Social media had exploded with praise. Her inbox was overflowing with messages from strangers, media outlets, and even corporate executives. But one email stood out. The subject line read, "Request for meeting Mr. Arthur Langston." Arthur Langston. The name rang a bell. Emma tapped the message open. Her hands trembled. The man she had rescued, barely breathing in the cold, lying beside a toppled walker, was no ordinary stranger. He was Arthur Langston, founder of Langston Health Systems, a billionaire philanthropist, and one of the most influential figures in the healthcare industry. The email said he was recovering well, and he remembered everything. He'd given urgent orders, "Find the girl who saved me." Immediately. Just then her phone buzzed again. A voice introduced herself as Laura Vance, Mr. Langston's personal assistant. "He would like to meet you today if you're available," she said. Emma's heart pounded. Yes, of course. An hour later, a sleek black Cadillac Escalade rolled up in front of the apartment. Emma stepped out into the cold morning air, wearing her only clean sweater and jeans still scuffed at the knees. The driver opened the door for her and said nothing as they pulled away from the laundromat-lined street where she lived and drove through the heart of downtown. The building that awaited her was a marvel of glass and steel, etched in gold with the words Langston Enterprises. Inside, everyone seemed to recognize her from the viral video. Whispers trailed behind her as she was escorted through polished corridors and into a private office bathed in natural light. There he was, Arthur Langston, the man she had pulled from traffic with trembling hands, now seated in a wheelchair beside the window. His eyes softened the moment they met hers. "You saved my life," he said quietly, his voice gravelly with gratitude. "And I'll never forget that." Emma opened her mouth, but words failed her. Langston smiled gently. "In my life, I've met presidents and generals. I've built hospitals and funded research centers. But I've never seen anyone do what you did, throw themselves into danger without knowing who they were saving, with no one watching and nothing to gain. That is rare. That is real." He motioned to his assistant, who handed Emma a tablet. On the screen were 4 stunning luxury cars: a red Ferrari, a black Rolls-Royce, a pearl-white Tesla, and a navy-blue Bentley, all with her name printed beside them in gold ink. Emma's jaw dropped. I don't understand." Langston looked her in the eyes. "Because the world doesn't always reward goodness. Sometimes it punishes it. You lost your job. You walked home in the rain. But you still stopped to help a stranger. You showed a kind of moral courage that can't be bought. And I want the world to remember it." Emma blinked, overwhelmed. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. Not in school, not at work, not even in her own neighborhood. To be seen like this, truly seen, was more shocking than the gifts themselves. "And there's more," Langston said. "I want you to join my foundation. We run programs that help the underserved. Single mothers, veterans, low-income families. We need someone like you. Not someone with a perfect resume, but someone with heart. And I believe that's you." Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. A chance to not just escape survival but to make a difference. "I'll do it," she whispered. "I'm ready." And in that moment everything changed. Not because she chased after fame, but because she stood still in the middle of chaos and chose to act. The morning after Emma Caldwell's heroic act went viral, she thought the whirlwind had passed. The emails, the cars, the job offer, it had all been surreal. But nothing could have prepared her for what came next. It began with a knock on the apartment door. Emma's mother answered, her frail voice echoing through their cramped living room. "Emma, it's someone from Langston Enterprises," she called out. Emma came to the door, her heart skipping. A young man in a suit smiled politely. "Miss Caldwell? I'm here to escort you to the press conference. Mr. Langston would like to introduce you to the world." I didn't expect it to be today," Emma whispered. "There's no time like the present," he replied kindly. Minutes later, Emma found herself in a luxury sedan, heading toward the Langston Foundation's central headquarters, a towering complex overlooking the river. As they pulled into the underground lot, she could already see journalists gathering near the main entrance. Cameras were everywhere. She felt her pulse quicken. Inside, a team was waiting. Stylists, wardrobe specialists, and even a speech coach. It felt like something out of a dream or a movie. Emma, the janitor's daughter who used to scrub cafeteria floors, was now being prepped to stand beside one of the most powerful men in America. The conference room was vast, filled with rows of chairs, massive LED screens, and reporters from every major outlet. Emma peeked from behind the curtain, her palms sweaty. This wasn't just about her anymore. Arthur Langston took the stage first. The room fell silent. "This past week I nearly lost my life," he began. But fate had other plans. A young woman who had just lost her job, who had no reason to stop, risked everything to save a stranger. She didn't know I was the CEO of a major corporation. She didn't care. What she saw was a human life. He turned and gestured for Emma to join him. Applause erupted as she stepped forward, trying to steady her breath. Langston continued, "Ladies and gentlemen, meet Emma Caldwell, an ordinary woman who reminded us all what extraordinary looks like." Emma stood beside him, overwhelmed. Then Langston leaned toward the microphone again. "And there's more," he said, his voice steady. "Emma has agreed to join our foundation in a leadership role. Because it's not degrees or dollars that make someone a leader. It's character." Flashbulbs went off like fireworks. But before the moment could settle, a security guard approached the stage, whispering urgently into Langston's ear. His expression shifted from joy to confusion. "There's someone here, claiming to know Miss Caldwell," he said into the mic, "someone who insists on speaking." Emma's heart sank. A tall, lean man in a faded gray suit stepped out from the aisle. His hair was streaked with gray, and his eyes, those eyes were unmistakable. "Emma," the man said softly. "It's me. It's Dad." A stunned silence swept the room. Emma froze. Her father. The man she hadn't seen since she was 6 years old. The man her mother said walked out and never looked back? Langston stepped aside. "Would you like to hear him out?" Emma nodded slowly. "Yes. I need to." The man's name was Thomas Caldwell. He spoke into the microphone, his voice shaky. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said. "I left because I thought it was the only way to protect you. But when I saw you on the news, I knew I had to come back." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to believe, but something in his eyes told her this wasn't a stunt. It was a reckoning. Langston placed a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens next, you don't have to go through it alone." And in that moment, with flashbulbs popping and the world watching, Emma realized something. Her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because the truth wasn't just about the man who left, but the woman she had become in his absence. Emma Caldwell thought the storm had passed. But as she stood backstage in a neatly tailored navy dress, her first that wasn't secondhand, she had no idea that her greatest test was still ahead. Across the crowded auditorium, cameras flashed as the world watched her remarkable story unfold. Just days before, she was a janitor's daughter, fired without warning. Now she had saved a man's life, become a national inspiration, and stood beside Arthur Langston, one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. Langston's voice carried through the hall, steady and warm. "This young woman risked everything for a stranger. She didn't ask who I was. She saw a person in need and she acted." The applause was deafening. Then came the twist no one expected. Langston paused as a security guard whispered in his ear. The CEO's smile faded. "We seem to have a visitor," he announced. "A man who claims to know Emma personally." Emma's heart pounded. A tall man in a worn suit stepped into the spotlight. His hair was graying at the temples, and his eyes looked tired but familiar. Her breath caught. The man was Thomas Caldwell, the father who had vanished from her life nearly 2 decades ago. "I'm sorry to intrude," Thomas said, stepping up to the mic, "but Emma, I'm your father." Gasps rippled across the room. Emma stood motionless. Her mother had always told her he'd walked out on them when she was 6, never to return. And now, here he was center stage before the eyes of the world. Langston looked to Emma gently. "Would you like to speak with him?" She nodded slowly. "Yes. I think I need to." Thomas's voice cracked as he spoke again. "I left because I thought I was protecting you and your mother. I was involved in something dangerous at the time, something bigger than I could handle." That's when the second shock hit. Another man, older and in a wheelchair, was rolled to the front of the auditorium. His voice cut through the silence like a knife. "That man is not telling you the full truth." He introduced himself as Robert Crane, former Chief Operations Officer at Langston Technologies. And according to him, Thomas hadn't simply left. He had vanished with classified research documents that could have compromised national security. "You built part of the very system that nearly failed," Crane said sharply. "And when the heat rose, you ran." Thomas turned pale, his fists clenched. "No. I tried to stop it. But you and the board wanted to push through with flawed tech, risking lives. I leaked the information to the press. I became a whistleblower." The tension thickened. Just then, a man in a dark suit emerged from the back, flashing a badge. "FBI. Step away from the stage." The agent confirmed it. Thomas Caldwell had been under secret investigation for over a decade. Not as a criminal, but as a potential whistleblower. Evidence has recently surfaced proving that Mr. Caldwell acted to prevent a catastrophic rollout. Langston, stunned, turned to Emma. "It seems your father might have saved more than just you." Emma looked from her father to the man in the wheelchair. She felt the weight of 2 conflicting truths pressing against her chest. But in that moment she made a choice. She stepped up to the microphone. "None of us can change the past," she said, her voice shaking. "But what we choose to do with the truth, that's what defines us." The crowd erupted in applause. Thomas's shoulders sagged with relief. He whispered, "Thank you, Emma." She nodded. "We both get a second chance. Let's not waste it." That day, Emma didn't just rewrite her own story. She reclaimed a fractured family legacy. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that even from the deepest wounds, something beautiful can rise. When Emma Caldwell stepped into the grand conference room of Langston Enterprises, she expected polite smiles, maybe a round of applause. What she didn't expect, what no one could have imagined, was a flood of public recognition, overwhelming support, and a tidal wave of national media interest. Just a few days earlier, she was walking home in the rain, unemployed and invisible. Today, she was the face of a national movement, proof that compassion could shake the world. Emma had been invited by Arthur Langston himself, the billionaire philanthropist whose life she had saved when he collapsed in the street. But this wasn't just about gratitude. Langston believed Emma's courage was something the world needed to see, and he was determined to make her voice heard. In the hour before the press conference, Emma had been prepped by media teams, stylists, and PR experts. But nothing could prepare her for what came next. As she stepped into the spotlight, the lights flared, and the crowd quieted. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Emma's palms were clammy, but she stood tall. "I'm not used to this," she began, her voice steady but soft. "Until last week, I was cleaning classrooms and counting quarters for bus fare. But I saw someone fall and I didn't think, I just ran." She paused, scanning the faces in front of her. "I didn't know that man was a billionaire. I only saw a person who needed help." A hush fell over the room. "This isn't about me," she continued. "It's about every waitress, every janitor, every person who gets looked past every day. We all matter. We all have worth. And sometimes it's the quiet ones who carry the loudest courage." The crowd erupted into applause, many standing in ovation. But behind the praise was something deeper. A shift, a reminder that ordinary people could still move mountains. But the surprises weren't over. Backstage, Emma was handed a tablet. On it, 4 luxury vehicles appeared, each bearing her name. Langston's voice came from behind her. "You thought losing your job was the end," he said. "But it was only the beginning." He explained that each car symbolized a chapter of her journey. Resilience, sacrifice, courage, and now opportunity. Emma was speechless. "I've built empires," Langston added. "But what you gave me, your life, your heart, your instinct, it's priceless. And I want to give you something in return." Still, the cars weren't the most astonishing gift. Langston turned to his assistant, who tapped a few buttons. A large screen behind them displayed a job offer. Emma was being offered a full-time leadership role at the Langston Foundation, where she would head a new initiative focused on underserved youth. Emma gasped. "But I don't have a college degree." Langston smiled. "Some people graduate with honors, others with character. You, Emma, have both." Tears welled in her eyes. "I want to help people like me," she whispered. "People who feel invisible." "Then let's make sure they're never invisible again," Langston replied. The room echoed with applause once more as Emma shook his hand. Later that evening, she returned to her modest apartment. Her mother was waiting on the porch, a hand over her mouth, tears spilling freely. "You did it, Emma," she whispered. "You changed your whole world." Emma hugged her tightly. "No, Mom. I just did what was right." The world changed itself. And for the first time in her life, Emma didn't feel like a janitor's daughter. She felt seen, heard, and most of all respected. Just when Emma Caldwell thought her story had reached its emotional peak, life threw her another twist, one she never saw coming. The press conference had ended in thunderous applause. Emma, the janitor's daughter who risked everything to save a stranger, was now being celebrated across the nation. Her inbox overflowed with messages. Her name trended on social media. And her new role with the Langston Foundation was already making headlines. But the biggest shock wasn't online. It came walking down the aisle of that grand auditorium. A tall man in a clean but worn suit approached the stage, his eyes clouded with fatigue and something deeper regret. The moment Emma's eyes met his, her world began to tilt. She knew that face, though it had grown older, more weathered. It was the man she'd spent her life wondering about. The man her mother said had walked away without a backward glance. He stepped up to the microphone. "Emma, it's me. I'm your father." The room froze. The cameras, the press, even Arthur Langston himself sat in stunned silence. Emma's breath caught. Her hands gripped the edge of the podium. "Why now?" she asked, barely audible. The man, Dean Carson, nodded solemnly. "Because I saw you on the news and I knew I had to come. I couldn't let you think I didn't care." Then Langston spoke. "Our records show he worked for my company, Grayson Technologies, 15 years ago. He vanished. No notice. No trace." Dean's voice cracked. "I disappeared because I made a choice, one that nearly destroyed me, but I did it to protect Emma and her mother." He confessed that he had worked on a classified AI system with dangerous potential. When he uncovered a critical flaw that the board refused to address, he leaked the truth to a journalist, knowing it would cost him everything. With legal threats looming, he vanished to shield his family. "I watched from a distance," Dean said. "Every birthday, every school play. I was there. Just never close enough to hurt you." Tears blurred Emma's vision. "Why didn't you come home?" "Because I thought you hated me," he whispered. "And I couldn't bear to see that in your eyes." Before the room could absorb the moment, another voice rang out. "Wait. That man is lying." All eyes turned toward a second man entering in a wheelchair. Samuel Crane, former COO of Grayson Technologies and Dean's former colleague. "He didn't act alone," Crane accused. "Dean helped build the unstable prototype. He didn't leave to protect anyone. He left because I warned him the board would pin it all on him." Dean's fists clenched. "You were the one who insisted we launch it. I tried to stop you." Accusations flew. Reporters shouted. The truth became murkier with each sentence. Then from the crowd, Emma's voice rose. "Enough." Silence returned. "I don't care about who was right or wrong 15 years ago," she said. "All I know is that my father came forward today. And for the first time in my life I heard him say he never stopped caring. That matters to me." Langston stepped up. Until this is resolved, both men will submit their evidence to federal investigators. Then he turned to Emma. Your future here doesn't depend on who your father is. It depends on who you've proven yourself to be. And you, Emma Caldwell, have earned everything on your own. As she walked off the stage, her father beside her, Emma realized something profound. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a reckoning. And maybe, just maybe, it was also the beginning of forgiveness. Just when Emma Caldwell thought she could finally breathe, another storm rolled in, this time not from her past, but from the shadows of her father's. In the midst of her rise from janitor's daughter to national inspiration, Emma found herself caught in a battle of truths. Her father, Dean Carson, had come forward with documents revealing he had once been a whistleblower, exposing a dangerous flaw in a high-level tech prototype. But the celebration was short-lived. That's when Samuel Crane, a former executive in a wheelchair, rolled into the auditorium and shattered the moment. He wasn't a hero, Crane claimed, holding up a folder of damning documents. He didn't act out of courage. He acted out of self-preservation. He leaked that information because I told him the board would pin it on him. He ran. Dean fired back, accusing Crane of corruption and manipulation, of greenlighting the flawed prototype and then trying to bury the evidence. The two men stood, one seated by age and guilt, the other weakened by years of hiding, facing off before a nation. The audience didn't know whom to believe. But Emma knew one thing. She couldn't let bitterness define her story. She stepped forward and said, "You're both trying to rewrite the past. But I'm only interested in the truth that leads us forward. In a world that often pits truth against survival, the greatest strength lies in the courage to face the past, flaws, failures, and all. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, but it opens the door to healing." If this story moved you, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you ever had to forgive someone who disappeared when you needed them most? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that celebrate courage, redemption, and the quiet heroes among us.